respected by repealing Section 42 of the Criminal Code and supporting my colleague's bill C-273. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to start by noting already this evening and in past debate we've heard really clear calls for how important this bill is, in particular from our honourable colleague from Nunavut. Tonight, the member for Winnipeg Centre further made clear that case. So with the limited time that I have, the contribution I'd like to make to this debate is really focused on the importance of listening to Indigenous leaders, and in particular, with respect to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Because in my view, Bill C-273 is an offer to all parliamentarians to move ahead with the TRC's calls to actions. And for my part, I've committed to fully implementing them, as has the Green Party of Canada. And so I'll read out once again Call to Action 6. We call upon the Government of Canada to repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code of Canada. This is exactly what Bill C-273 seeks to do. As background, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued 94 calls to action back in 2015, and progress has been absurdly slow. At the current pace, the calls will not be completed until 2081. Yet, every party in this House of Commons has committed to fully implementing the calls. I'll summarize them now. In 2015, then leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, now the Prime Minister, said, "On behalf of the Liberal Party of Canada and our parliamentary caucus, I affirm our unwavering support for the TRC's recommendations and call on the Government of Canada to take immediate action to implement them." While that's being applauded by a member from the governing party, I would remind that member, through you, of course, that Call to Action 6 is exactly what this bill is calling for. And so I certainly hope that this government will be supporting Bill 273. The Conservative Party, in 2021, Erin O'Toole, then leader of the Conservative Party, pledged a plan to implement all Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. I assume that included Call to Action 6. The Bloc Québécois, in 2021, their platform, Bloc MPs would pressure the federal government to implement all recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In the same campaign, 2021, the leader of the NDP committed to fully implement all outstanding recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. An NDP MP, in fact, is bringing forward a bill here to work towards doing so. And the leader of the Green Party of Canada, the member for Saanich Gulf Islands, pledged the same thing. And so, in short, I hope my colleagues follow through on the commitments of their parties and those that I know they personally, I'm sure, have also made. And certainly, at the very least, that this would get to committee, because this is the second time now in my time as an MP that I'm seeing this gap between commitments to follow the TRC calls to action and opportunities that MPs have to do so. The last time was on Bill C-5. And one of the TRC call to action, number 32, is to remove mandatory minimum penalties. And of course, C-5 removed some, but not all of them. That wasn't what was in call to action 32. It was to follow through on removing all of them. Once again, though, in this vote on C-273, parliamentarians will have another opportunity for those who have pledged to pressure the government to do so. Well, this is now being offered. An MP has put forward a bill that would very directly call to repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code. That is Call to Action 6. And so I would hope that colleagues would support this bill, and in doing so, move us one very small step closer towards following through on all 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission from back in 2015. We are now in 2024. We need to move more quickly. Here is one chance to do so. Thank you.
The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby has 5 minutes for right of reply.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to say that tomorrow we have an important task. We'll be voting on principle. And this bill would ban corporal punishment of children in Canada. The provision in question has been around since 1892 that allows children to be punished physically. So tomorrow it'll be a vote in principle. One of my colleagues just said that it would require an amendment to this bill, but tomorrow it's a vote in principle. Obviously, amendments could be made at committee. Secondly, Madam Speaker, and it's important to underscore this, children all across the country, like my colleague from Winnipeg Centre just said, and in Quebec there are dozens of organizations, including the Association of Youth Centres and Community Centres in Quebec, the Association of Child Protection Doctors, the Association of Early Childhood Learning in Quebec. All those organizations, just to name a few, there are many more, all those organizations want members from Quebec and members from all across Canada to support this bill tomorrow. And that's because we know what the impact of corporal punishment is on children. It leads to harms that are lasting and serious. And as the associations explained, 75% of cases of childhood abuse are related to punishment, corporal punishment, or incidents of that. And so these organizations are saying that Section 43 of the Criminal Code must be done away with. Other countries are doing the same thing. Madam Speaker, it's important to point this out. More recently, for example, Colombia, Japan, South Africa, and France, Argentina, Brazil, Poland, and Spain, among others, have abolished corporal punishment for children. So the vote tomorrow is a vote in principle, and it joins with 65 other countries in the world that have already held this debate and decided that, of course, Section 43 of the Criminal Code should be repealed.
A shout out to Corinne's Quest, Madam Speaker, Kathy and John Lynn of New Westminster, British Columbia, and all the organizations who have called for the abolition of Section 43 of the Criminal Code. They've done that, as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission tells us in their calls to action number 6, after the horrendous genocide that happened in residential schools. They are saying now is the time to move forward on call to action number 6. And as my colleagues have mentioned, it has been 8 years since those calls to action have been issued. There has not been one call to action that has been advanced since 2022. And this means that members of Parliament tomorrow will have the ability to vote in principle on moving forward on call to action number 6 and removing Section 43 of the Criminal Code, which dates back to 1892, and finally put in place the kind of atmosphere for kids that we need to see in our country. Madam Speaker, I mentioned earlier many of the national organizations that are calling on parliamentarians to abolish Section 43. It includes the Anglican Church of Canada, Big Brothers. It includes the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies, occupational therapists, pediatric health centers, pediatric nurses, social workers, the Canadian Mental Health Association, Canadian Red Cross, the YMCA, YWCA, and more than 65 countries that have called for the same thing, because they know that 75% of substantiated physical abuse cases in Canada arise from incidences of physical punishment. They say very clearly that it is time for Canada to move beyond aspect of the criminal code that was put in place in 1892. It is time to heed the calls to action to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It is time to put in place call to action number 6. It is time to learn from the past, Madam Speaker. Tomorrow, members of Parliament will have an important vote, the vote in principle, to move forward from this aspect of the criminal code that justifies physical punishment of children. I hope that all those voices are heard, and I hope that members of Parliament vote yes on Bill 273.
It being 6:30, the